So Ashley just completed 5 years of graduate school and a thesis, and this is her real test. This is going to be... So first, tell us about Northern Virginia Hebrew Congregation. Give us a thumbnail. Tell us where you're going to be a rabbi.
So I'm going to be the assistant rabbi and director of congregational learning at NVHC. It's in Reston, Virginia. So it's right outside of DC, very close to Dulles Airport. So if you're ever in the area, send me a message. I would love to get coffee.
So I called Ashley a little over a week ago and said, I think we should do this because I remember being where you are, and the best metaphor I can come up with is it's like new car smell. It's like everything's perfect right now, but you haven't really done anything yet. You don't have any miles on the car. And so everything is exactly as it should be because you've come from this Jewish community at HUC that has helped to get you to this point. And I remember feeling like for years I had waited to do all these things we've been talking about doing, to drive this car. Then, which Ashley already knows, but she'll know even more, then you get on the roads and it's all a little different. So before the roads wear you down a little bit with, take you in different directions, let's talk about this idealistic moment of leaving, graduating from HUC, being a rabbi. What do you think is the most exciting thing happening in the Jewish world right now from your perspective? Coming out of becoming a rabbi in this last month. When you look out at the Jewish world, what excites you?
So many things excite me about Judaism and the Jewish world. I'm really excited to have this honor of being part of the leadership of the people that have meant so much to me growing up and being able to facilitate this learning that I've loved to do over the course of my life. That really excites me. What's also really exciting about this moment is we're kind of making history every day. Today, of all days, is the 50th anniversary of the ordination of the first female rabbi. We celebrated her at our ordination a few weeks ago. She offered a phenomenal sermon and blessing for myself and for the rest of my class. So it's a big moment, and we've grown so much in the last 50 years, in the last decades since Reform Judaism started in this country, and we only have more to do and more to grow, and it's very exciting for me to be a part of that.
So I want to ask you a more personal question in a way, which is, other than getting a paycheck, what are you most excited about as you enter the rabbinate? And I'll tell you what my answer was. The paycheck is obvious because you pay a lot of student loans in order to get to that paycheck. But when I went to school, I was in LA, and I had 5 years of books that were all stacked in my bedroom. So this doesn't have to be a deep rabbinic answer. I'm curious, what is it that you're most excited about personally as you enter the rabbinate? For me, it was bookshelves that weren't in my bedroom. You can have a deeper answer. I'm a superficial rabbi, but you can.
My fiance is very excited for stacks of books to not be all over the apartment, that's for sure. It's been great packing up my library over the last couple of weeks. But I'm really excited to, enter this role specifically and work on a team. I have a senior rabbi and a cantor at the synagogue who I'm very excited to work with. And just learn so much and be able to work with kids again. I've been in these small student pulpits that have very few kids. So that's, a blessing and a challenge in its own way. But I'm just really excited for the position and to move across the country and all these new opportunities. It's really a season of newness, as with Shavuot coming up this weekend.
So let's shift to challenges, which is, and again, I want to touch on the way I remember feeling coming out of HUC. Again, I felt that I had a clear view of the Jewish world. And then you get into a specific community like Akron, and you understand that Akron has its own stuff and its own needs and its own story. But when you're leaving HUC, you're becoming a rabbi, we say in Klal Yisrael, and so your view of the world is the great Jewish world. So what do you think are the most pressing concerns now? We have our own, we would say our own thing in Akron as to what we want. But what would you say when you look out at the Jewish world today? What's the most pressing concern for the Jewish world?
Well, I'll say 6 months ago, when I was going through the placement process, I think the greatest concern for the Jewish world, which was on my mind, which is a concern, but it's also it was a little bit of a blessing for me, is that there's a rabbi shortage going around, believe it or not. There aren't as many students enrolling in schools, so it was a blessing that I kind of got to pick where I wanted to go in some sense. But that's also a struggle, thinking about the future of our school and the future of the movement. Where are our leaders coming from? So that's one challenge that's really on my mind. And I think the challenge which hits home for all of you here in Akron is safety is also so much on my mind. Physical safety after the news of the last few weeks, but also spiritual and emotional safety. How are we building our communities so people feel that they are safe at all moments of their lives? If they're mourning, if they're celebrating, if they're struggling, how do we do that? And it's something that us as leaders and the lay leaders in the kahal here, in the community here, it's something that we get right sometimes, and something we also don't get it right. So I think really safety is the big challenge on my mind.
So that was something that came up certainly. I don't know that the average person in the Jewish world was fully aware of it, but in this last year in the Reform movement, there have been 3 major ethical investigations, and it was really an uncovering of challenges that we've perhaps not been upfront about over the last century even. So specifically to HUC, where you were as a student, where Rabbi Horowitz and I were ordained as well, one of those investigations uncovered a lot of sexism, at times deep sexual harassment, and in some ways it was shared with us and the public as a bit of a history. In other words, this is what happened 50 years ago, this is what happened 30 years ago, this is what happened 10 years ago. What was it like for you right now? You're in the moment. So what was it like for you as a woman? Here we are 50 years after the first woman was ordained, which we're celebrating. And at the same time, we were sort of mourning in that 50 years how women and others, but particularly women, were treated in our own institution. How was it for you? How did you feel you were treated? How did you feel as a student?
That's a great question. It's that safety is like a double-edged sword there again, or the report really is a double-edged sword in a lot of ways. I read the report, the HUC report specifically, as I was shocked, I was saddened, I was also a little optimistic that only a few students had come forward, and I know that there are some that didn't, but I think that's also reflective of the changing culture at HUC, which is great. We can talk about the URJ report, and I encourage you all, if you haven't read the URJ report, to read it and to speak up and email people at the URJ, because that is equally as disturbing. But the HUC report, it is a lot of history. I felt nothing but safe at HUC. I felt like I had, especially in Cincinnati, access to my administrators, access to my professors, and it wasn't just to ask them a question about Bible or Talmud or whatever I was studying. They deeply cared about me as a student, and they cared about me as a rabbi in formation, and I really believe I got the best education possible. I know that's not what every student enrolled at HUC feels like right now. I know some of them would still voice that they don't always feel safe, and that's important to remember, that you can hear my experience, but know that there are others that don't necessarily feel that way. But I would say that it is a changing time. You know, if you read the HUC report, there were women who spoke up, who complained that they had to go downstairs into the basement of a building that they weren't always in to use the restroom, because there were no women's restrooms, because there were no men originally. And it's amazing that now we have gender-inclusive restrooms and access and nursing rooms for students, because the school really respects, or they're moving towards respecting and understanding that students come in all different shapes, and we're at all kinds of different life points. We have a lot of second career professionals who are enrolled in school. We have new mothers, we have young couples, all of these things. So it's hopeful that they're changing, but change is slow.
And I think for many of us here, I think for the three of us, we have a very and maybe for more of us, especially those who may have helped pay for some of those classes, we have a personal connection to HUC in the way that perhaps you have a personal connection to Temple Israel or to your alma mater. But I would encourage you to look at some of these reports and to listen to Rabbi Barrett, and also because it reflects, we are a mirror image. In other words, our institutions are microcosms of these other institutions. They're just bigger and more public. So I think we're learning a lot, and I was reading those reports and thinking back to our own institutions today. Are we as inclusive as we should be? What are the areas in which we need to be asking these questions? HUC hired a law firm, and they asked everybody to come forward, whoever had a complaint, and then they spent months studying them, and then they reported on it. So we don't have the resources to do that, but we should ask the same question. So I want to move to a little bit of a more fun lightning round for you. So tell us, what was your favorite class?
Well, this one could go all day. I think my two favorite classes, my first one is last spring I took a class with Dr. Mark Wachowski, who just recently retired from HUC, in Reform Responsa, which Responsa is the body of literature which rabbis write. Someone asks a rabbi a question, and the rabbi, reads all of the halakha, all of the law on that question, and then they kind of write all that down, and then they offer an opinion. So that should be really interesting to people, because as Reform Jews, you would probably say something about halakha and your lack of relationship to it. We as Reform Jews don't necessarily identify ourselves right away as Jews who might take on halakha in the same way as an Orthodox Jew might. So I took a class in what Reform Responsa is, and it's fascinating. You can go and check the books out from the library. I'm sure we have a few here. You can find answers to all kinds of questions. What should our relationship be to the American and Canadian and Israeli flags on the bima? What is a Reform mikvah? Should we use a Sefer Torah that was saved from the Holocaust? What are all of these? What are our answers to these questions as Reform Jews? It's fascinating, and I hope to teach on Reform Responsa in the future. My other favorite class was I took one of the blessings of COVID. It was that it really kicked HUC into high gear, allowing us to take cross-campus classes. So we, as 4th and 5th year students, were allowed to take Zoom classes with professors at the New York and LA campuses. So I took a class with Dr. Eskenazi on the book of Samuel and the King David story, and we went in depth over an entire semester and looked at Shmuel, Aleph, and Bet, and I had honestly never learned the David story until that moment, so another great class with a scholar. She's terrific.
So I'm going to preface this by saying that this will not, the next question, this will not be the last time we ask you this question. And because we don't have time to go into the depth that we are going to want to go into, and that is every rabbinical student writes a thesis, which is never read, except by your advisor. That's the intent of the thesis. And it's a ton of work. It's a year worth of work. And how many pages was yours?
110-ish.
Okay. So you write these 110 pages. So you ready? So we have to ask Ashley about her thesis, because the title of her thesis is History of Temple Israel in Akron from 1911 to 1944. So 110 pages about us 100 years ago. So what should we know about ourselves?
Well, you all should know first and foremost that I think that speaks, the fact that I chose this as my topic to study for a year, I think speaks to the nature of this place. It also speaks to a little bit of how nerdy I am, that I wanted to work in the archives with Dr. Gary Zola. But this place is really special. There's something about smaller Midwestern communities which make people own their Judaism in a way that you don't always have to do in the bigger cities. Some may debate me on that, but that's my take on it. So I grew up here, and from the very beginning, I had to own my Judaism in a way that I don't think my friends from Chicago that I met at summer camp had to do. So it was thanks to you all and others who can't sit in these chairs this evening, who helped me pick this topic, along with Dr. Zola and the archives. But I wanted to take the story of Temple Israel through the Board of Trustees minutes and place that into historical context. I learned a lot about the rubber industry here, which I didn't know. I learned a lot about the Merriman Road building and the purchase of the property and all kinds of money things. And I think one takeaway is that Jews have been struggling with financial issues and their synagogues for decades and decades and decades, and probably back to Maimonides and way before that. So I would say don't worry, that it will all be okay and we'll figure it out somehow. The fact that Rabbi Alexander, who was the rabbi from 1919, oh my gosh, I'm blanking now, 1919 until 1944, that he was never actually fired during the Depression, I think is like just a beacon of hope. They were behind many weeks and a lot of money on his paycheck, but he was never let go officially. So maybe that calms you down, I don't know. But so I wanted to take the board minutes and take the Beacon Journal and other scholarly material out there and really place the story of Akron into historical context. And my takeaway is that all of the trends that hit New York and the New England communities and all of these big Jewish communities, they hit Akron in the same way. So we could tell the story of American Jewry through the eyes of Akron, through the eyes of Cleveland or Cincinnati or Dayton, and you would get all of these wonderful little just like tidbits of people's lives through doing this project and doing a history on any congregation. So I'm gonna send Rabbi a copy, and you can all read it while you fall asleep at night. But it's true. I think that Temple Israel is really special, and you can add another rabbi to your collection of rabbis that came from this place.
So the last question is, so what are you, in a few weeks you'll get to start working as a rabbi and teaching and leading people at Northern Virginia Hebrew Congregation. What are you most excited about teaching and doing there?
So many things. I'm really looking forward to continuing the high holiday planning process, not to stress you or any clergy out, but they've already started the high holiday planning process. So that's exciting. It's hard to believe that, the Chagim are on people's radars once again. I'm really excited I get the opportunity to go to Camp Harlem, which feels, it hurts my heart a little bit because it's not Asrui or Gucci or any of the camps around here. But I'm excited. I love summer camp, and I'm really excited to meet the people there and hear their stories and be parts of their lives.
So this will not be the last time that Rabbi Barrett is on our bima, for sure. And as is the case, we have a little bit of tradition in our congregation that rabbis from Akron find their way back to Ohio, and even if they don't these days, what I notice is we start having congregants, some of you are in the room, who just watch these other rabbis on Friday nights, because now everything's on TV anyway. And so you can live in Akron and be a fan of Rabbi Barrett, as I'm sure some people will be watching on Friday nights. And Lois is here. Lois watches like 4 rabbis every Friday night because she's known so many of the rabbis who've grown up in our congregation and has so many allegiances with other congregations too. So we'll be following you. But first, it's a great honor to invite Rabbi Horowitz to join me and you in front of our ark, and for everyone to stand as we offer you this blessing and invite you to carry our Torah around this congregation.